Good evening. I'd like to welcome you tonight as you join us at First Baptist Church, Prineville, for our Good Friday service. Tonight is a time of reflection and contemplation. We'll be reading the Word together. We'll be singing together. We'll be walking with Jesus during his last hours as he approached and went to the cross, as he suffered on the cross and he died for our sake. So I'd like to welcome you as you are in your homes tonight watching this. Would you enter in prayerfully and contemplatively in prayer, in word, in song? We're also going to take communion together. So if you haven't done so already, you might pause the video and go and gather your communion elements, some sort of grape drink and some crackers or some bread, because we will focus on that later on as we come to the cross and we remember Christ's great sacrifice for us. So again, welcome, and we hope that your heart is drawn to Jesus, your Savior, tonight. Thank you.
Matthew 26, 14 through 25. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" And the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, "Truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, "Is it I, Lord?" He answered, "He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born." Judas, who would betray him, answered, "Is it I, Rabbi?" He said to him, "You have said so."
Lament by Avery Stevens. I let the fibers drip, drawing them through my fingers, and tossed the rope high over the tallest branch. He had known. He had known. I tasted the words, let the salt of them settle, chewed them, gargled them, said them. What will you give me if I give him over to you? The weight of the pouch set upon a thief's hands. I let the weight of the price paid for the Son of Man fill my heart. 30 pieces of silver slipped through my fingers. Each glint, the sunlight pushed a wild light. A good price for a dying man. The plan to betray him crafted itself into my mind. The priests helped me plot. That night I followed him one last time. I had told the priests to wait patiently this night and to prepare the ambush. We feasted, and with the wine and the bread, I dipped my hand, tasting the bitter of our bondage. And the man knew. He knew. I pulled the rope tighter, the noose of it lighter than the pouch of condemned innocence. I scaled each branch and let the memories take me. Last night I had snuck away, the chief priests and soldiers at the ready. They waited for me, and I led them up into a garden, a picture of where it all began. But I didn't realize until after. He stood there knowing, like he waited for me. He knew. "Greetings, Rabbi." I leaned toward the ruff of his cheek and let my lips and breath caress. And they came. My game finished. The signal to arrest replenished. I walked away then, my belt heavy and my footsteps light. A smile regarded my cheeks, pulling them upward to heaven's plea. A false prophet's death, none of my concern. I had my reward. But as the sunlight broke the sky and the distant jeering filled the land, I knew. Despair, as deep as the ocean, as wide as the great expanse, as far as east from the west, growled. I knew. The words of the Son of Man rang true. Each miracle new, my heart began to shred at the seam, strips falling down, creaking as bone, split apart from the throne. I knew, and I ran. I ran to the priests. The whippings didn't cease. And I told them he was innocent. I told them. My belt ruptured. My knees broke against the cold, dead floor. I let the silver slip through my fingers once more. Each crash of silver upon the floor was a death sentence once more. And I left. Now standing atop the highest branch, rope tight, the ground rumbled and the sky wept, and I knew. Its fibers now caressing a betrayer's throat. I stepped. He knew.
And they went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch." And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." And he came and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you might not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came the third time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners."
Jesus, you alone. You are the Lord God Almighty, strong in compassion and mercy. Oh, Jesus, you alone. I've searched the world for a love that could fill my heart. Nothing compares to the wonder of who you are. Holy, all the earth singing, holy, all the angels cry, holy, Jesus, you alone. Jesus, you alone. You set the stars in the heavens. You set the world into motion. Oh, Jesus, you alone. You breathed your life in creation. You walked among your creation. searched the world for a love that could fill my heart. Nothing compares to the wonder of who you are. Holy, all the earth singing, holy, all the angels cry, holy, Jesus, you alone. Worthy, all creation sings, worthy, all the heavens exalt thee, Jesus, you alone. Jesus, you alone. You shed your blood for salvation. You broke the curse for our freedom. Oh, Jesus, you alone. You rose from death with the morning. You'll come again in your glory. Oh, Jesus, you alone. I've searched the world for a love that could fill my heart. Nothing compares to the wonder of who you are. Holy, all the earth singing, holy, all the angels cry, holy, Jesus, you alone. Worthy, all creation sings, worthy, all the heavens exalt thee, Jesus, you alone. Holy, I can't help but sing, holy, how my heart cries out, holy, Jesus, you alone. Worthy, I lift my voice and sing, worthy, I bow my life to exalt thee, Jesus, you alone. Jesus, you alone.
Luke 22:54-62. Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house, and Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And a little later someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly.
No mountain, no valley, no gain or loss we know could keep us from your love. No sickness sickness, no secret, no chain is strong enough to keep us from your love, to keep us from your love. How high, how wide, no matter where I am, healing is in your hands. How deep, how strong, now by your grace I stand. Healing is in your hands. Our present, our future, our past is in your hands. We're covered by your blood. We're covered by your blood. How high, how wide, no matter where I am, healing is in your hands. How deep, how strong, now by your grace I stand. Healing is in your hands. In all things, we know that we are more than conquerors. You keep us by your love. In all things, we know that we are more than conquerors. You keep us by your love. You keep us by your love. How high, how wide, no matter where I am, healing is in your hands. How deep is your love? How strong is your love? Now by your grace I stand. Healing is in your hands.
Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. And some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.' Yet even about this their testimony did not agree. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' And he answered him, 'You have said so.' And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate again asked him, 'Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you.' But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the feast he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. And he answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man you call the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him!" And Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified.
Being a governor for Rome was a dream of mine for as long as I can remember. The power, the connections, the occasional meeting with Caesar himself, it was pretty intriguing. And I have to admit, I like being a person of notability, or at least I did. There's something to say for being so high up, but there's a lot of other things to say about it too. The job, 90% of the time, is a pain. Just recently, for example, I had just returned from Rome, and I came back to my region, and it was in an uproar. Now, where I am from is this area where there's this big city called Jerusalem. And the people there were having this big religious festival. I could care less. I had no idea what any of their festivals were about. I kind of had this deal with them. I would give them some leeway to do whatever they wanted to do, and their part was to just stay out of my hair. The only thing I wanted them to do was to not bother me. But here they were, bothering me. I don't have time to deal with their petty little things. But they kept pestering me, and finally I figured I would just see and talk to whoever they wanted me to talk to, and that would save more time than just pushing them off. So they brought this guy into me. And I remember I was writing something, so I was looking down, and I looked up, and I was shocked. This guy had already been roughed up pretty good. I said something to him like, "Wow, you must have done something seriously wrong." And he didn't say anything. I asked his accusers, what did he do? Was this guy, did he kill somebody? No. Did he steal something? No. Did he beat somebody? Did he cheat somebody? Was he in a place he shouldn't have been? The answer was always no. The only thing I could figure out was that he had said some things that really got under their skin, which actually kind of make me like him. I kicked them out because I wanted to just talk to him, and I didn't want any extra commentary. And I said to him, I said, "These people, they're claiming that you're saying you're a king. Are you the king of the Jews?" And he looked at me and he said, "Is that your idea? Or did somebody talk to you about me?" And I was like, "Hey, do I look like someone who would even care about that kind of thing? Listen, man, your own people handed you over to me. It was your own leaders. What have you done?" And he said to me, and I remember this, he said, "I have come to testify to the truth." And that struck me. What is truth? I asked. My whole life, I've heard scientists, philosophers, poets, preachers, politicians, they've all told me endlessly about truth. And the sound they make is the sound of crickets chirping. But this man, Jesus, he just stood there. He just stood there, as if that was his answer, as if he himself was the answer. It was obvious that he did nothing deserving of death. So I went out and I told them that. But they complained and argued more and more. And so finally I thought I'd try to appease them. And so I had him scourged. And we put together this crown of thorns, and we put it on his head, jammed it in there. We gave him this robe. We tried to send a nice little message. I thought that might satisfy them. But it didn't. They actually called on me to crucify him. What are you talking about? I said, why? What has this man done? And they said a bunch of stuff. It was so little. And then they pulled out their trump card. They said, this man said that he was the Son of God. And this is where things turned for me. Right about that time, my wife sent me a message. And it said, don't have anything to do with this innocent man, because I've had a dream about him, and I've suffered because of this dream. What? What was going on? At this point, I have to admit, I was a little afraid. So I rushed back in. I pulled Jesus in, and he was so thrashed now. His eyes were swollen shut. He struggled to stand. And so I got real close to his face. I tried to look into his eyes. I tried to find him. I leaned real close in, and I said, where do you come from? And he didn't say anything again. I went back out, and I said, hey, listen, there's nothing wrong with this man. We should let him go. But they cried back more and more, no, you should crucify him, crucify him. And I said, he has done nothing wrong. And then they let me have it. They said, any man who lets this man go is not a friend of Caesar, because he claimed to be a king. You can't be a king and be a friend of Caesar. They had me trapped. I gave in. I handed him over to be crucified. I could see that by letting Jesus go, that would open up this hornet's nest that I could not control. So I brought out this basin, and I made this big spectacle right in front of the crowd. I filled this basin with water, and I put my hands in it, and I washed my hands right there, and I said, I am innocent of this man's blood. And they took him away. And that was the last I saw of him. And I thought maybe it would be the last time I'd think of him. But it wasn't. I think about him all the time. And I can't stop washing my hands. I can't stop thinking that I got it wrong. You know, in the most important time to get it right, I got it wrong. I could have spared his life. Or at least I could have spared him the scourging and the catcalls and at least the appalling way in which he died. I could have said some word of comfort to him when there was no one else in the world with either the chance or the courage to speak it. I could have shook his hand. I could have said goodbye. I could have made some small gesture which ultimately would have made no difference, but to me it would have made all the difference. But I didn't do it. I didn't do it. There's talk now that he's come back, that he's alive again. And I hope it's true. I hope that he is the truth. I hope that he is the king after all. Then maybe he can forgive me for the thing for which I cannot forgive myself.
Isaiah 53, 1 through 5. Who has believed what he has heard from us? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a young plant, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. Mark 15, 15 through 20. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. And the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole battalion. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on him. And they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him and kneeling down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him, and they led him out to crucify him.
Tonight, as we come to communion, we've been walking with Jesus through his suffering, through his betrayal, his arrest, through his disciples scattering and denying that they even know him, through his trial and through his scourging, and now to the cross. And in all this, we look back and we partake of this meal that Jesus instituted before he went to his death. And he took the bread of the Passover meal and he broke it and he handed it around to his disciples and he said, "Take this. This is my body," pointing them to the death and the suffering that he was going to take on for them. And so as we take this bread tonight, and as you, in your home, take and eat of this bread, we remember Jesus who died for us, who took in his body the suffering that we deserve. But we also remember that as his body was broken and as he gave up his life, he created us into a body. He created us into a whole loaf, if you will, called the church, and he made us one. And during these weeks where we are isolated and separate and not able to gather with one another, we are saddened, I think, by the fact that we are scattered. And so tonight we even take this communion bread that we should take to represent our connection to Christ and with each other, but we take it when we're separated. But the beauty behind all of this is that in Jesus' death, he made us one, and we are one, whether we're in the same room or we're scattered throughout in our homes or even throughout the world, because of the one Spirit that he's also given to us. So as we take the bread tonight, I want us to remember Jesus. I want us to focus on the cross and his suffering. And I also want us to remember each other, because we are one loaf, one bread, one body, because of the great sacrifice and the death of our Savior, Jesus Christ. So let's eat together.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that he would give his only Son to make a wretch his treasure. How great the pain of searing loss, the Father turns his face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my guilt among his shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything, no gifts, no powers, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: his wounds have paid my ransom. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: his wounds have paid my ransom.
Tonight we do recognize Jesus' great love for us, a love that was serious enough to take him to his death on our behalf. And as he went through his ministry, I believe that his face was set towards that cross the entire time. I believe he was thinking about his death throughout his life and throughout his ministry, because he knew that he'd come to lay down his life and to pour out his blood to cover our sin and to pay as a sacrifice, to pay for our sin and to take judgment on himself so that we could be his, so that we could become his people. Before he died, Jesus sat with his disciples around that Passover meal. He handed out the bread, and then he took the cup. He took the cup of redemption, and he passed it around to his disciples and said, "Take and drink, for this is my blood, the blood of the new covenant, and I am bringing you into relationship with me through pouring out my blood for you as a sacrifice for the forgiveness of sins." And this was like the great bridegroom coming for his bride, coming for his church, coming for his people to take them to himself in marriage. And as we drink of this, cup, we remember his blood for sure, but we also look forward to that great feast, that wedding feast, one day when the bridegroom, the Lamb, will bring his bride, the church, and celebrate with the best of wine and the best of food. And we will all celebrate together our great bridegroom, Jesus Christ, who's died for us, who poured out his life for us, who paid for our sins, and who made us his own. So let's remember all of that as we come and as we drink together of the cup of the new covenant in Jesus' blood.
As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he desires him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'"
Mark 15:33 through 39. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders hearing it said, "Behold, he is talking to Elijah." And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God."
sorrows, what a name for the Son of God who came, ruined sinners to reclaim. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Bearing shame and scoffing rude, in my place condemned he stood, sealed my pardon with his blood. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Guilty, violent, helpless we, spotless Lamb of God was he, full atonement, can it be? Hallelujah, what a Savior. Lifted up was he to die.